Welcome to the Oh So Spurs podcast. Have you been wondering what Thomas Frank is all about and why Tottenham Hotspur are in deep negotiations with him? Well, you've come to the right place. We are going to go over who Thomas Frank is and get the support of Brentford Fan and correspondent for Planet FPL pod, Tom. How are you, Tom?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
Doing very well, thanks. And we have Spurs fan and Thomas Frank investigator, I'll call you today, Raj. Right, should we kick off with the obvious question? What's your kind of Brentford fans' reaction been to the links of Thomas Frank to Spurs?
Yeah, I think a lot of my messages, as soon as I saw Ange sacked, was a lot of swearing messages towards other friends that I have as Spurs fans. Yeah, not worried, I guess, is the best thing of Ange. As soon as I saw Ange sacked, it was like everyone obviously had heard that Frank was the sort of top candidate being linked with. So a tinge of, I think disappointment. But I think obviously, you don't want someone that's been at the club. I think he's the second longest Prem manager at the moment. That link being away from your club when you've got nice, it's settled. And after the season we've just had, obviously, you want to build on that rather than having to rebuild. I guess the best thing.
How long did you think he would stick around for? Did you think it was going to be time for him to be moving on, if not this year, the year after?
I think it's a hard one, obviously, because, he gets asked it in a lot of interviews. And his general response has always been that basically the grass isn't always greener. And that although there's sort of big clubs sniffing around, that he's incredibly happy at Brentford. And, there's, for what we've done over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, there's potential for us to build forward. Obviously, we were not a million miles away from a European place ourselves this year. And so you sort of want to see, you obviously want to believe that what he's saying is, he doesn't want to move to a big club, but obviously his ambition is there. And, you can see he's an excellent manager. So it was one of those where it was expected but unexpected. So, at some point he gets linked to every job that we've seen over the last few years, United, Chelsea, Spurs, and he's been linked with pretty much all of them. And so at some point you expect him to make the move. But trying to keep hold of him would have been nice. Well, at the moment, obviously he's still a Brentford manager, so I'm not saying anything so far.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe later we'll ask a little bit about how you think he might settle in at Spurs specifically. But I guess one thing I'd like to ask you is, do you reckon you could explain just briefly, like an elevator pitch, what do you think makes him so great as a manager? What's he bringing to Spurs?
I think the first thing is, like, you see in press conferences, his calm demeanour is ridiculous. Everyone, you have managers sort of all over the spectrum, and he's just always sort of almost quite monotone. I think he really gets a really good team dynamic with the players. They've released quite a few of the sort of team talks and sort of post-match talks with the team on the Twitter channel, on the Brentford Twitter channels recently. You sort of listen to it and you sort of sit there going like, I wish I was playing for him. I think he brings a real good team dynamic. And then from a tactical point of view, I think we've seen quite a lot over the last few years that you get like managers like Vincent Kompany and people like that, and everyone's going, they've got a style of play and that's how they should play. And, he sticks to his beliefs. I think the nice thing with Frank is he doesn't have that one style of play. We've seen the team develop over whether he's playing 3-5-2, 4-3-3. He picks and chooses depending on opponent, and he's happy to change tactics within a game to basically try and win the game. So I think for me, that's a nice thing to watch where, he's not just, well, this is how I play, this is how it's going to be. It's, right, what do I need to do in this game to win the game? And he's happy to go out there. And I mean, his record against, I guess, you guys are obviously part of it, but the so-say Big Six is phenomenal. I mean, his obviously record with Spurs this year wasn't so good, but previously in recent years, I mean, we're the only team to beat Man City twice in their Prem title a few years ago. For me, he's a fantastic manager.
How do you think he's going to do you think he'd be a good fit to a Big Six club? Because when I look at his history, he started off at Bromby, right? Yep. And he worked his way up to the managerial position, and he had a background working in the youth setup, I believe, at the start. Then when he went to Brentford, it was in an assistant manager role originally. Yep. And I almost forget the name of you, Dean Smith, wasn't it? Who went to Leicester. He was given the opportunity to step up into the managerial position and take it from there. And I was looking at a kind of a small documentary video about Frank, and he spoke about, his ambitions then were, I think we can compete and get into the Big Six. My preference is front foot football. I like humble people. That's all my culture. It's about kind, humble, but confident individuals. And that's all, and it's all lovely. But I think some Spurs fans would go, yeah, but when you're in the Big Six, it's a kind of you're battling the egotistical types of managers where you have to be a little bit of an a-hole at times to kind of elevate yourself that last little step to get there. But how do you think he'd handle it? Because as well, he also was always done a great job working on smaller budgets, right, as well, getting them. He talks a lot about getting the most out of youth with his background as well, and that being really important to him. Do you feel he would still be able to adapt and fit into a club that maybe the pressure's there to kind of deliver immediately as well? Because he started slowly, right? 2 wins in 8, was it, in his first
really slow.
start at Brentford? And at Bromby as well, I think he won 1 in 6 in his first start, or similar numbers to that. So at Spurs, I think pressure after losing Ange Postecoglou as an example is going to see those who wanted him to stay are going to be quite vocal, I think, if Frank starts slowly. But yeah, how do you think he's going to get on at a club of a stature? Brentford are a big club, but, in the big 6 realm, there's a bit different kind of expectations.
No, I think, unfortunately, it's like a complete unknown, really. Like, because, his only real managerial role, I mean, so you can take Bromby into it, but is Brentford. And he's been there such a long time, and obviously it's a comfortable place for him to be. It's going to go from, once a week football to twice a week football, and managing a larger squad, playing more games. So it'll be really difficult to see. I think he's got the ability to do it. I mean, I think he's a fantastic coach, and I think he fits Spurs' sort of style way. I assume the manager with Spurs really is more of a coach than a manager, because obviously, with your guys' sort of recruitment as well. Similar to what Brentford has. So it's such a hard thing to say, because obviously we can only see it from our side, where, we've only seen success with him. But can he make the step up of going to somewhere where, you've got to deal with a bigger squad, you've got to deal with a lot more personalities, because obviously with the bigger team, you've got, players like, I'm picking them out, but, Romero's a World Cup winner. You've got Son, who's obviously been there forever and a day, and I mean, seems like the nicest bloke in the world, so I'm sure he'll get on absolute fire with Frank. But incredibly difficult to say whether he can make that step up, or whether he has the ability to do that. I mean, I've got all faith that he can, but it is so hard to say whether he has that.
And were there certain types of players that you've found he needs to make his systems work? You mentioned he's quite versatile. Is there some players you're like, well, that person's absolutely key to Thomas Frank doing well at Brentford, and if they get injured, things are going to drop off? Or does he just look at the team and then build a system according to who's there?
Yeah, I think the great thing about him is the versatility, obviously mentioned at the start, is you've seen players throughout the years at Brentford completely change positions. So Brian Mbeumo, obviously, for me, best position is right wing, but we've seen him at striker. We've seen him engage at right wing back. We've seen him all over the place. Keane Lewis-Potter, who came from Hull, came as a left winger and is a very talented left winger. He's played literally all year as left back. And people are saying now that, he'll be challenging next year with Rico Henry back fit, and, who starts between the two of them. And, before Rico got injured, there was talks of him even making England calls with the lack of left backs we had at the time. So he's able to change and transform players to multiple positions. And we've seen it this year with Mikkel Damsgaard as well, I think was the real big one. Last year was sort of more of a central sort of player, whereas this year's been pushed far further forward of what we expected, and has been an absolute revelation for us. And so, I think the good thing is it almost doesn't matter what players he's got. He's able to sort of pick and use the players he has in his arsenal to, go and put them where he needs to play them.
And Raj, you doing some research background found that, 2 games a week you were thinking might be a new challenge for Thomas Frank?
Well, I was wondering if it was or it wasn't, because I don't know, Tom, if you remember back to the Championship, I was just looking, I think a lot of people forget this, but in the Championship, there's more games, isn't there? So there's 46 league games. Every one of those is critical. It's not like there's some dead rubber against some easy Europa League team or whatever that we might have had once or twice. Can you remember how he handled that? I guess well enough, because Brentford got promoted. But can you remember much about the way he approached rotation, or like keeping everybody happy in the squad in the Championship when you were trying to get out?
To be honest, going back sort of, a few years, I'm trying to remember. So, front three for us, it was almost sort of a pretty constant as well. I don't think we saw too much rotation. Since we've been in the Prem, we've not seen huge amounts of rotation. Yeah, going back into the Championship, I can't really remember too much with who would rotate or who got that much rotation. There wasn't, we never had a huge squad anyway. It was sort of, you had a few sort of covering players, but it was never huge amounts of rotation, but it always seemed to manage quite well. It's a hard one to remember back that far, and whether we were able to...
you don't notice like big injury problems at the club? Do you keep most of your players fit most of the time?
Well, no. Last season was obviously a nightmare. We had long-term injuries for a long period of time. We had a huge amount of squad out, and obviously that reflected our league position, finishing pretty low down last year comparative to the year before, and obviously this year. We had some long-term injuries as well. So no, it's not been about to say with obviously what you've had with injury-wise. I mean, last year I think we might have actually had the most first team players, like minutes-wise injuries, if that makes sense. Most injuries per first teamer compared to when we had, I mean, everyone's talking about obviously yourselves and Newcastle. I think we actually had worse injuries than both of you guys compared to first teamers. Whether that's down to what we're doing or whether, medical team or what, you'd like to think that obviously with the resources you guys have that, the medical side of things will probably be slightly better.
I think people would go, unfortunately not.
I agree with you there. Yeah, that's it's a bone of contention with that on our side.
Yeah. Absolutely. No, so we've seen quite a lot of big injuries as well. So, massively unfortunate ones. But yeah, we have seen quite a lot of injuries ourselves.
Were they kind of like hamstrings popping, ACLs, or more impact injuries? What's the...
Yeah, Rico Henry was ACL, our left back. Aaron Hickey, I think, was hamstring, and it was just a recurring hamstring issue. And then we've had sort of the random freak ones as well. I think, Fabio Cavalli we signed obviously last year from Liverpool. I think he's had shoulder surgery on some issues out of the shoulders. I can't think of too many hamstring injuries, apart from people that have... I mean, Igor Thiago's come in, and I think he had a hamstring injury. Apologies, the dogs are shouting outside.
That's all right.
Thiago came in, but obviously he got injured first sort of pre-season game with us. So I think that's one of those where it's really hard to say whether that's something we've done or whether that's something that's happened before he joined us. So sort of more freak than training wise, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. And I guess where would you, if you had to predict, say Frank would finish in the league managing Spurs, if you had to guess?
I mean, I think that you guys have had a massive issue with injuries as well this year, so I think you're going to see a big improvement just based on that anyway. So I mean, I'd see you comfortably in the top 7 because I mean the players you've got are still obviously you should have a huge amount of talent in that squad, and I can't see you finishing outside of the top 7. So I don't see why he can't do something like that. It's obviously managing Champions League football as well for a while, and I think that would be sort of bare minimum for you guys, wouldn't it?
And I guess one of the other reservations people have is cups. We've had a lot of managers in the past who've been quite good at managing the league, but until Ange, we've always had managers that have typically fallen short in cup competitions. How does Frank do in the cups? Does he prioritise them and does he handle them well?
So the last few years we sort of, again, obviously we had quite a lot of injuries the couple of seasons before. We did big rotations in the FA Cup and League Cup. This season, went relatively far. I want to say in the Carabao Cup this year actually, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, must have been. One of them we got to the quarters, beaten by Newcastle. So I think, it must have been Carabao. I obviously can't remember that one. But one of them we went quite far in this year. I think it's classic, he starts off with a bit of rotation, and then as soon as it gets a bit more serious, that's when he starts to, play a more serious team. I think with obviously most managers, we don't have the largest squad compared to a lot of the teams in the Prem as well. So having to rotate and manage cup competitions as well as the league, obviously being Brentford, our main focus will always be the league until sort of this year, until a sort of Newcastle and Crystal Palace have won those cups. It's sort of been, it's a Man City, Liverpool and Arsenal. That's sort of the team at Chelsea. That's the sort of teams we've seen winning the league and FA Cup. So for us, it's not been a huge priority. And obviously our league status has been sort of, get that secured first and then see where we can push on to.
So just looking at the league then, and I guess the players all come back in, few weeks. When is it? Like beginning of July or something? And then they start doing pre-season, and then we'll all start watching pre-season friendlies. I think teams start a career. What do you think we as Spurs fans will notice first about the differences with a Thomas Frank team compared to what we've seen the past year or two? Like, what do you reckon will stand out? We'll go, oh, right, this is different. This is what's going on.
I think it'll be a little bit less loose going forward. I mean, obviously what we hear is obviously non-Spurs fans is Ange ball and sort of all out attack, and sort of with Frank it's a lot more dialed back. It's very much what we've seen with Frank is very much he'll happily sit back and then be countering football. It's sort of one of those where we can move from forward to back so quickly, and it's something that's been really obvious, to Brentford fans that, you go from attack to defence really quickly, and the effort for players to get back is incredible. You watch sort of 3 or 4 players will be running back and all of a sudden we'll have 7, 8 players sprinting 100% to get back and defend. It's very much all going forward, all coming back. It seems very much like that, I'd say.
Right. And can you remember, because, Frank seems to be saying quite a lot in various different interviews. It's amazing, actually, now I think about it, how many interviews there are where he talks in detail about how he likes to set up tactically. I don't know if that's true for all coaches, but he really has given a lot. But he seems to be talking about when he was in the Championship, he was, Brentford was much more attacking. They would dominate the ball and score absolutely tons of goals. And it sounded like a pragmatic adjustment, which you said at the beginning as well, that Brentford said, okay, we got to play differently in the Premier League, and especially against the big six clubs. Do you anticipate, especially feeling that pressure and sort of Ange's ghost behind him, do you think he'll feel that pressure to go more like he did in the Championship and bring back the more attacking versions that more attacking style than he was using at Brentford in the Championship?
I think he'd probably, for your guys' squad, I think he'd probably stick with what he's been playing mainly this year's 4-3-3. So when we went up, it was straight to sort of a 3-5-2, which really became a 5-3-2 sort of in defence. I think but as we've gone through this season, he's really stuck with the 4-3-3, and it's sort of been more attacking football than what we've seen previously. So I think before this season, sort of predominantly you'd see sort of a 3-5-2 with wing backs, but this season we've definitely moved to a slightly more attacking formation. I mean, we scored a huge amount of goals this season, and I think he'd carry that on with yourselves. But it's with a slightly more defensive mindset, I think, than what you have at the moment. I think that's what you probably see. I don't think we've had the world's best defence due to injuries really this season. So we've conceded a lot of goals this season, but I think that might be more to do with defensive injuries rather than just we concede goals. And I think you'd probably see a slightly more defensive approach to begin with if you joined yourselves.
Do you need quite quick defenders then? I'm assuming if you're sprinting back from the final third quite often, it sounds like then you're going to need quite pacey centre-backs to...
Well, what they seem to have had is, we've got the world's two slowest centre-backs, really. We've got, obviously this year not so bad, but obviously Ben Mee, renowned for his pace, obviously, and Ethan Pinnock, we've still been there. We've relied quite a lot on the full-backs to be quite versatile and speedy. I mean, Keane Lewis Potter's absolutely rapid. He's been playing left-back this year. And Rico Henry, and before he was injured, is incredibly quick. And then on the right-hand side, you've got Hickey and I has been playing there. And now we've just brought in a right-back, Coyote, who's also pretty quick. And so it seems to be sort of relatively slow centre-backs, but quick full-backs that seem to cover that position more so. So no, we've not seemed to have to rely on anyone sort of really quick in the centre.
And is your midfield three, is it tend to be like how is it set up? Do you tend to have two protecting the defenders or just one? I think Spurs have had some problems, particularly in the league this year, trying to have just one midfield, like initially just trying to have one central midfielder helping out the centre-backs. Do you, has Frank normally been a bit more conservative having two there in the middle, like a lot of teams do, frankly? Yeah,
definitely. So Norgard sits in the middle, a sort of holding, and we've had a mixture really of Vitaly and Yarmoluk, a young Ukrainian who's been fantastic. Sort of more I think Tas is a holding player, but then being given the freedom to go forward, should they need to. So with Damsgaard sitting in front of the two of them. So yeah, definitely two holding and then one sitting in front of the pair. But again, I think what he does really well is he looks at the team and looks at how the game's progressing to allow, a second holding player to push forward if it's deemed to be, the right time for them to get forward. That second player's given a bit more freedom, I'd say, than sort of just sit back and holding.
Just one other question I had on this, just speaking on how much he tinkers within a game. Just the general impression I get of the stuff I'm seeing with Thomas Frank. He describes himself as very logical, and he seems to see himself as a problem solver. And he talks about how his substitutions are pre-planned, and he's got a plan A, a plan B, a plan AB, sort of almost every scenario. In contrast, now I don't know how much of this is true and how much of it is just a persona Ange was projecting. Ange in his team talks and the way he was talking about football seemed to be about he stands on the side, mostly completely silent, just looking on and just watching what the players will do and see how they figure solutions out for themselves. Whereas Frank seems to be, we've thought about all this in advance and you all know what your jobs are, right? And I mean, is that a fair characterization that Frank has scenario planned almost everything? All midfielders know if this happens, you go here. If this happens, you go there. And everybody feels prepared with a plan?
I mean, it does seem very much like that especially with substitutions. We've seen in games where we've gone 1-0 down with sort of maybe 30 minutes to go, and he'll bring off a centre-back and throw on sort of an attacker and drop one of the sort of more holding players back and sort of playing that sort of midfield centre-back position where they're sort of covering the centre-back position but allowing more attackers on the field. And it does seem very much that, if we are going behind, then he's happy to throw on players just sort of attack it. It's not just throwing them on sort of out of the blue. It seems like, okay, we know we're taking off this player and we know that the player coming on is going to be more aggressive. But so the one we've seen, not so much this year because he's not playing so much of a first team role, but Janelt, when they're sort of playing as CDM, who's played as left back and centre back previously as well, what will happen is, so say we're 1-0 down, a centre back will come on, so let's say Ben Mee in this example, Janelt will sort of move to a sort of centre back / holding midfield role. And so in attack, he'll move forward and sort of press and sort of play the ball from the centre. But as soon as he's defending, he's the first one back into that position. But it's allowing then another attacking player to come on and try and basically win the game, or obviously get an equaliser. And so you see it as a really, but it's not a sort of crazy, let's just throw on as many attacks as possible. It seems to be very much right, he knows exactly what his role is once the centre-back comes off. He knows exactly where to be, exactly where to go. And it's already sort of, like you said, a pre-planned tactic of, right, as soon as this player comes off and you're there, you know what your job is. And so, very much so.
Interesting to see how we can cope with the 2 games a week, like we were saying earlier then, when it Raj, because we know the challenge of European football is not having time often to get back on the training pitch with your players, look at your opposition and formulate a plan game to game. Sometimes you're just in the fire 3 games a week. You're just landing at the ground, getting in an ice bath, watching a video with the manager, and you're into the next one, on a coach up to the next ground. But do you think there's certain players that Frank will try and come in for at Brentford and bring into Spurs?
I don't know if there's anyone that you'd be particularly interested in. Obviously, you guys know the gaps in your team better than myself, but I can't see who you'd be going for or what positions you'd be after, if that makes sense. So,
relatedly then, I mean, what about out of the current Spurs players that you know, do you have any which you think, okay, like Frank's going to work brilliantly with those? And I'm also just remembered this last night at some point that I think you guys tried to sign Brennan Johnson and Archie Gray, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what do you think he might do with those two? And are there other players that you think, Frank is really going to work well with them?
Yeah, I think obviously them both being quite young. I think actually Brennan Johnson was, for me and for a lot of fans, I think Brennan Johnson was looked at as sort of cover coming in, but also potentially a transform into a striker option. And I think that's sort of what you're looking at. I think, again, with Archie Gray and his versatility, I think that's sort of what Frank's really good at utilising, is someone that can play multiple positions. I actually think someone he'll work really well with is Romero, talking about that sort of centre-back, but being able to be, obviously his ball playing is fantastic as well. And I think that, obviously I've seen a few links with him potentially away, but I'm sure he will stay with you guys. But if he does stay, then I think he's that sort of player is someone that Frank will work really well with, because he'll be allowed the, work as a centre-back, but given sort of a bit more freedom to maybe go and use his, his skill set, because his ball passing is very good. Yeah, and I think he'll work really well with the young players. Someone that, that's what he's done really well at Brentford, is obviously take on a huge amount of youth and transform them into players who can play multiple positions and do a job for the team. So I think the likes of your Lucas Bergvals and players like that, I think he'll work really well with as well.
Yeah. Our whole philosophy is around, the whole transfer philosophy and strategy is around bringing in young players prior to a Manchester City wanting them because they're not quite there on the development path yet, but making them into those players and then holding on to them with the idea that in a couple of years' time, Spurs will be able to compete on multiple fronts. So I'm assuming that was a key criteria for Frank when you look at his background, working in youth development, working his way through up to assistant manager, trusting players at Brentford and getting more out of them and typically progressing them. And you'd say most players have improved under Frank then, overall? He's quite good at one-on-one coaching with players.
Absolutely. The players that haven't improved have gone, basically. So we've bought in players where they've sort of, with our model, we've bought in players, we expect them to get to a certain level, and if they've not reached that level, then they've been moved on or shipped out relatively quickly. But all the players that we've seen come through, and obviously we've picked the Brentford model, obviously is well known, but obviously there's a lot of players that have come through the ranks that have definitely stepped up and gone way beyond expectations of coming from teams that are unknown to obviously playing now in the Premier League.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, look, this has been really interesting for me, Tom. Thank you so much. And let's see how the coming days happens, because you might be listening to this and Thomas Frank might be a Spurs manager, or it may have just been all a tactic to get himself a pay rise at Brentford.
Yeah.
He may have someone else. We don't know.
Yeah, good luck with Oliver Glasner or Marco Silva next season.
But I think it's a good sign for the club fans who want him, if their incumbent supporter group are hoping they stay, right? It's a sign of a manager that's respected. And would you say is it kind of a non-negotiable, the vast majority of your fans are supportive of the future with Frank, or is there some divides in the camp?
No, it's very much that if the option was given of, do we want Frank to stay or go, then 100% is stay. I don't think there's any questions in that. And I think, the worst case scenario really for us this season was Ange being sacked, because there wasn't really any links to anybody else at the time. So it was sort of, okay, now Ange is gone. It's sort of, and the rumours have started straight away, and the fact that you guys are sort of, there's talks already. That was sort of worst case scenario for us. Really, we didn't want, we were very settled and we were ready to build on for next season. Yeah. So not the best of news to hear Friday morning, but
let's see. A lot changes very quickly in football, and there's even a rumour that Ange Postecoglou might be going the other way to Brentford, and we'll be able to help you with that one if you want to chat about that.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, look, thanks so much again, Tom. All the best to you. We do finish with an up the Spurs, but you won't have to say it. You can say up the Bees, but up the Spurs and the Bees, and roll on next season for both of us.
Cheers, Tom.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.